Hello, Keep Singing members. It is great to see everybody. Oh, it's so weird. It gives me this mirror image. Maybe it's showing you? I don't even know. Zoom, 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 zoom. Come on and zoom, 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 zoom. Anybody remember that? I am totally dating myself right there. Child of the 70s, teen of the 80s. Hey, today we are going to talk about breath support. So hopefully some others will be joining us today. And if you do, you'll be joining us and I will let you in if I feel like it. Haha, just kidding. Of course I'll let you in. So I do hope that if you're watching the replay of this, that you will take advantage of sending any questions you might have to the Q&A. Remember, it's Q&A, like one word, like it's kind of like Quanda or Kanda. Q&A spelled out, Q-A-N-D-A, at keep hyphen, not M dash, not N dash, but just hyphen or dash singing.com, keep-singing.com. So let's jump in. I am going to share my screen. Well, let me give you a little bit of a context of what we're doing. And by the way, sorry about all the junk over there. That is for I'm doing a benefit yard sale online for to benefit anti-trafficking efforts of Women at Risk International. And you can't even see 90% of the stuff here in my office. So let's go. Breath support is our topic today. And many of you, or several of you really, have expressed to me wanting to be able to control your tone better, to be able to hold notes longer, to be able to sing through phrases without gasping toward the end. Trying to think of other things that are related to breathing. Things that, all those things, tone, being able to sustain, even sustaining pitch, has a lot to do with breath support and control. And we'll talk about what all that nomenclature means in just a few minutes. Holding out phrases, singing through phrases, growing notes. So a lot, 97% of dynamics, such as like swelling a note or bringing it back down, like if you had a crescendo or a decrescendo, for those of you who have any music background, just means get louder or get softer. That is controlled not here. It is controlled by your total respiratory system and your breath support. So the fancy word for this is, if you want to get all, Italian classical language on us here, it is called appoggio, A-P-P-O-G-G-I-O. And that just means, like, it literally means to lean. I've never quite figured that out, like exactly why that word, to lean, a word that means to lean, why that's used. However, whatever. Well, let's move on. I've got theories on it. You can make up your own. Let me know what they are. I do. I have linguistic theories on it. I have, if I was an Italian, coming up with words to describe breath support for singing, I might use that. Okay. I would probably have chosen something else, but I wasn't around when they coined that term. So nobody asked me. And I just want to make sure that this is coming through correctly and that everything is okay. Everything is, I just want y'all to be able to hear me. Microphone. Okay, good. Yeah. Please do let me know in feedback if the recordings are not coming through clearly for you or whatever. Okay, So I want to show you some pictures. I want you to see your apparatus. Let me tell you a very quick story. Um, as you all know, you probably read my bio before you came into the program. I sang professionally for throughout my 20s and kind of into my 30s, but mainly throughout my 20s. And I took voice lessons the whole time uh, from several different teachers. And one of those, one of those told me the correct thing about the diaphragm. And not that the others were bad teachers, they just were misinformed, mistold, probably by their own teachers, about what the diaphragm actually is and what it does and how it interacts with the voice, because the diaphragm has everything to do with your voice. And so, and surely you have been told at some point in your singing, or if you've been on stage ever, your director or someone has said to you, speak from your diaphragm or sing from your diaphragm. I would put money on, I would bet to that maybe that director, maybe that director knew what a diaphragm actually is, a respiratory diaphragm, and maybe he or she didn't. And maybe that's just what they'd always heard. So I was told that the diaphragm was like a roller shade, like, and you pull it down to, and literally that's what he kind of described to me. Now, this person who taught me that was an absolutely phenomenal singer and entertainer. And he taught me a lot of really good things. And he probably mainly um, helped me learn how to warm up and work out my voice and gave me confidence. Like, he believed in me like nobody's business. And that's important. Um, but he did not know what a diaphragm was, and he had a completely wrong idea about it, which was so interesting. But he was concerned still about breath control. Every singer every singer who's serious about singing needs to be. So, and he was not the only one. I had other teachers that did not know. They would point here to the abdominal wall and indicate that that's your diaphragm. That's not your diaphragm, that's your abdominal wall. It interacts with the diaphragm by related movement, but it does not, and it can support the work of the diaphragm, but it is not the diaphragm. Mainly your abdominal wall stays fairly relaxed. So I want to show you some photos because you are going to know what the heck your diaphragm is, where it is, and what it does, and how it interacts with your voice. So we are going to talk about that today. Let me share my screen and hopefully I'll do this right. Okay. Woohoo! Looks like I did it right. Okay. So this is a little collection I have made over the years of cartoonish, some kind of semi-cartoonish pictures about the respiratory system, because it is important to know. So let's just see real quick what it looks like from the outside. So this is the whole thoracic cavity. Your rib cage is all around your chest, of course. That's what comprises your chest, and protects only two things are inside your rib cage. One is your pair of lungs and the stuff that goes with that, and then your heart. That's what your ribs do. They protect those things, those organs. There's nothing else in there. Like your stomach's not in there, your spleen's not in there, and nothing else is in there. Those are the two things. Those are the two, like, and if those things were not so protected, you would die. If one of those failed to function, you would die. So, and anyway, we'll just leave that there. Okay, that's kind of sad thought. Let's move on. So, but you can see here where the lungs now sit. Now, I want you to follow my little cursor and see this big thing that kind of looks a little bit like a toilet plunger. That's the best. It really is. It's a crazy sounding thing, but that's the best image that we can relate to that I have come up with to describe the diaphragm. That is your diaphragm muscle. If you look right here, you can see kind of the they've drawn in kind of the muscle ribbing and stuff like that. So it sits underneath the lungs. The lungs literally sit on top of the diaphragm. This looks a little wonky because I took this picture from a book that I use that is too awkward for me to try to use the book with you. And it's got those little clear, transparent cellophane pages that you can peel one off the other. I love those books, and you can kind of see layer by layer what's going on. So it's a little wonky, but it's still pretty decent. Okay, so here's inside, if we were to cut away the front of the rib cage. Now you can just see how the lung, they're not including the left lung in this, only including the right lung in this particular rendering. And you can see how it rests on top of the diaphragm. It's pretty exciting. Up here is the whole, the larynx, the thyroid gland is here, and the larynx is right behind that. So the thyroid kind of sits in front of the larynx, kind of sort of around it, kind of hangs off it a little bit, kind of. All right, let's keep going, looking inside the chest. That's just taking more layers away. Now let's see where the diaphragm sits in relationship to literally everything else in your whole core, as we call it now, the trunk of your body. Everything else is underneath the diaphragm. You can see that it is, there's a little bit of space there. Honestly, I have no desire to look inside a cadaver. Thank you, doctors and scientists who do that for us. So I don't know how much proximity, how actual this proximity is. We know that if you've ever seen even clips of live surgery being performed, it does not look as clean and cartoonish as this. So I couldn't tell you if it's exactly to these exact proportions, but this is going to give you a really good idea. So number 17 is your diaphragm muscle. You can see that right there. Boom, diaphragm. That's your diaphragm muscle. You can see how big it is. It attaches at the bottom of the rib cage all the way around. And the rib cage is lower in the back than the front. Yes, lower in the back than the front. It goes a little bit further. So the diaphragm rests a little bit higher in the front than in the back. But still, if you just kind of think of the pliability of a toilet plunger, that's going to get you in the right direction. It's not perfect, but it's going to get you in the right direction. So everything else sits below it. Now, this is why people think that your abdomen is your diaphragm, or is the thing that does the diaphragmatic function for your breathing, but it is not. The only reason why your abdomen moves while you're breathing is because of displacement. So you can imagine if this diaphragm moves down, which we'll get into that in just a second, because you're going to learn how you breathe. If it goes down, all the stuff underneath it has to go somewhere, right? So it just kind of gently, and we're not talking like huge, right? But this is the movement. So if the diaphragm goes down, this is going to go out. This is an exaggeration, but that's what is going to happen. Can you rub your tummy and pat your head at the same time and then switch hands? That took some coordination. So that is why people have this wrong but understandable idea of that this is where you support your breath from. It's not. So you're going to learn how it actually happens. Okay, so here we are. Here are the like basic parts of the respiratory system, and this is going to give us a little bit more of the lay of the land for you to know how these things occur. So we're not yet going to talk about actual phonation, which is the creation of sound, which involves the activation of the larynx for vocalization, or phonation is the fancy official term. But we're just going to talk just about inhaling and exhaling, how it happens, because you really have to know that to know how you sing too. And this understanding this is the basis for the breathing or apoggio, the breathing method that I teach, which I'll also hopefully we'll get to that today. I don't know, because there's a lot to know. Okay, so I might do part 2 where I teach you the method. It's a 3-step process, published by a woman named Jeannie Diva, who was one of my former teachers. She did know what she was talking about. She studied it, but she's not the only person who taught it to me. Another person, but we'll get into that when we get to that. Okay, so we've got the diaphragm down below the lungs. Lungs literally rest on the diaphragm. The lungs are not muscles in and of themselves. The best image I've come up with to describe the lungs is a wet car sponge. And that's not exactly how they function, but they just like in the way that a wet car sponge is responsive. So, and it's kind of biggish and you can kind of shove it into whatever shape you want as long as it's wet. If it's dry, it won't be quite as flexible, right? But that's kind of, and when you go like this, it can take in the water. And when you go like this, it pushes water out. And that's gonna come into play in just a few minutes. So we have the nasal chamber. You have 2 primary places that air can enter your body, your nose, and that whole nasal chamber of your respiratory tract, and your mouth. So those are the 2 ways you can get air in and out of your body. Thank goodness God gave us the mouth in addition, not only for eating, in addition to the nose, because how many times have you been stuffed up in your nose and you cannot breathe? So thank God for mouths. All right, let's move on. And then of course the air travels in through these 2 potential places. The resting way for it to happen is through the nose. Typically at rest, the mouth will be closed, unless a person is reclined. Whole nother story. But anyways, the primary way that you bring air in and out is through your nose, down through nasal passages, through your windpipe or bronchial. Help me, it's not coming to me. Blah de blah. Okay, it'll come back when I stop trying. Through the windpipe and into the lungs. All right, and does all the things that need to happen to air. You have the oxygen exchange that occurs inside your lungs, and that is all really good. Let me see if there's something else before. Okay, all right. Okay, let me go to this one first. Okay, so let's talk about how we breathe in. Let me give you this is the overview. So on the left, we have an inhale. All right, you have air in, air's going in. Now, this picture, I don't love it because it's not entirely clear that the air coming in is dependent upon the diaphragm pulling down first. And the diaphragm, saying that it pulls down, that's kind of a weird way to phrase this, but this was kind of like an all-in-one book for kids, and I thought, oh, this is a really simple diagram. I'll use this. And it's pretty decent. It's doing some good stuff. So it's giving us a launching pad. So you can see how the lung fills the thoracic cavity and rests on top of the diaphragm. The diaphragm does go down. It's through contraction, not pulling, but I guess you could use the word pull. But the diaphragm contracts on itself and becomes smaller. Anybody ever do shrinky dinks back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s before whatever happened to them happened? You take a plastic sheet, it's kind of like an overhead transparency, again, dating myself, but a plastic sheet and you draw and color all over it, and then you cut it out like you want it, and then you put it in the oven and it heats up and the whole thing shrinks into this cute little ornament. You can hang them up everywhere. They're really fun. Somebody bring back Shrinky Dinks. Those are fun. Those were fun. So the diaphragm kind of does that. And it gets smaller. When it gets smaller, when it contracts on itself, it gets smaller and therefore goes down. Because if you think of that toilet bowl plunger, if it were to be like a Shrinky Dink and be heated up in the oven, and if it did that, it would probably, toilet bowl plunger would probably just melt. But if it was to do that, it would go in on itself. Just imagine it getting smaller. The top would get lower. We're not talking about feet here. We're talking about inches. Okay. So let's say this is my, let me stop sharing for just a second. I want you to see my map, not drawn to scale, but this, let's say this is my diaphragm. This is my upside down toilet bowl plunger. And let's say this is my ribs. These are my ribs up here. But if my diaphragm contracts on itself, it gets smaller and it goes down. All right. When it goes down, that gives the lungs the opportunity to expand because the lungs will fit whatever space they are given, right? So they will then be able to expand because the diaphragm goes down. When the diaphragm goes down and the lung expands, inside the lungs, both of them, is created a condition called a vacuum. A vacuum. Okay, so vacuum is the presence of nothing, right? There's no matter in there whatsoever, not gas, solid, liquid. So, but as we all learned in high school physics, the universe hates a vacuum, so it's going to fill it with something. What we want the lung to be filled with, of course, is air. So that vacuum is created. Just think like a vacuum cleaner here for just a minute. So the vacuum cleaner electronically creates a vacuum, which then causes the air to be sucked in through the hose, right? Or up through the thing that you're pushing like this. And that electronically induced state of vacuum on a continual basis sucks up all the dirty particles off of your floor through the hose or whatever apparatus into a bag, catches it. And then when you turn it off, the vacuum ceases to be created, that condition, and the air stops flowing in. Okay. When your diaphragm goes down, it contracts, goes down, the lung expands, that creates a vacuum. When that vacuum is created, the universe wants to fill it. That vacuum is going to pull in air through your whatever's open, nose or mouth. So it's going to pull in air. Da, 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 that's your inhale. Okay, let's go back to our little shared screen here. So now you can see our inhale. Let me get this. Boom, air in. So now you can more understand why I was nitpicky about the diaphragm pulling down. Not really. So, but that has to go down, and that creates the space for the lungs, which creates inside the lungs a vacuum, which then pulls air in. All right. Then, how does it all happen? In reverse, from the bottom up. So when the diaphragm finishes contracting, and thank goodness this is an autonomic system, we don't have to think about this, although we are going to think about this. We're going to think about this in our apogeo studies, our breath control studies, breath management studies. But when it stops contracting, it goes back up to its resting position, presses up on the lungs, and smushes the air out. That's basically a very pedestrian way to describe what's happening. That's your exhale. So now you can see inhale because the diaphragm has gone down. The exhale happens because the diaphragm relaxes again. Okay, so that is an inhale and an exhale. And I really do want each of you to learn what is happening. I want you to think about that cause and effect. I want you to think about and learn how it begins with, well, it begins with a neurological signal, but that aside, it begins with a contraction the of the diaphragm muscle. Um, yeah, it begins with the contraction of the diaphragm muscle, and I want you to think about that cause and effect. Cause and effect. The brain says we need oxygen exchange. Diaphragm contract. Diaphragm contracts, goes down. Lung gets to expand because it's given more space. That expansion creates a vacuum. The universe wants to fill it. It pulls air in through the presumably open airways, nose or mouth. Comes in, there is your inhale. When the diaphragm stops contracting, it goes back to its relaxed position, presses up on the lungs, and compresses the air out. It doesn't sound like every time. Okay, so that's like a super exaggerated form, right? So this is a fairly gentle motion, but it happens over and over and over and over and over again. Now, as singers, we are going to learn to that's really all I wanted to cover today. I wanted you to understand the respiratory process. I know that took almost 30 minutes, but this is important. It's so foundational for you understanding the next stuff you're going to do. And we will do that on week 3 if I don't just make time to just do it and put it in there with it today, but probably it'll happen week 3. But I want you to understand this. I want you to memorize it. I want you even to teach someone else about the respiratory process. I want you to understand the cause and effect. I want you to understand the order in which it happens. And because it is important for you as a singer, you will understand why it's important later, right? When we move to next steps. As singers, we're going to learn to manage this process in some ways. You might think we're going to control the breathing process. I think that's fair to say. We're going to control the respiration process because we're going to manage the air to not all flow out at the same time. That's how you get better breath control. And whether people know it or not, when they said sing from your diaphragm or speak from your diaphragm, they really wanted more resonance from you. They wanted more volume. And they wanted you to do it in a way that wasn't going to make your voice blow out, because they knew somewhere in the back of their mind, someone told them that if you just start pushing out more sound, you're going to blow out your voice. And then you'll be like however many countless untrained actors and actresses who never had any voice lessons, or like, yeah, speaking lessons, who did blow out. And by the time they spend it all and pushed and wore out their laryngeal function and irritated their larynx so much that they spent all the performances hoarse and unable to sing, which is really unpleasant for everyone. Maybe most of which is that poor person who is hoarse the entire time and can't fulfill and can't have their glory, moment. I've worked so hard for this, and now I can't even speak or sing. But it's also, secondarily, it is unfair to the audiences because you could have prevented it. That's kind of harsh to say, isn't it? But if you are training, it behooves you to understand what is going on, and because you want to respect your audiences as well as to respect your body. So you need to understand what happens in the respiratory process, so you will understand how we're going to build our breath method on top of this, so that we can manage our breath in such a way that our larynx is completely free to do its work, and will do it beautifully, and you will be able to resonate and provide more power and volume in a way that's way more informed and trained, because you have understood your breath and how your larynx functions and how your diaphragm and your larynx. It's a big dance between those two. And that is how you have a great voice, and that's how you, good, perfect. That is how you are able to sing long periods of time and ask a lot from your voice. So shoot me any questions at Q&A at keep-singing.com, and shoot me any questions about this. And I think that's all. All right, everybody, the Lord bless you, and I can't wait to hear how things are going. Please check in your member area. Please do this is not for me, it's for you. Do a journal entry this week. Go in and put something in one of the forums in the discussion area. Create a video of yourself singing and upload it to a YouTube channel. I need to make y'all an instructional video. If you don't already know how to do that, I need to make you an instructional video as to how to create your own free YouTube channel so you can upload as many videos as you want, and send us a link to put a link in there so that I and others, so that you can grow and so that the rest of us can share in the joy of your growth. Everybody needs to do that. Blah, blah, blah. Everybody needs to do that. Everybody do that. Everybody do that. So I will see everybody soon, I hope. Take care and keep singing. Yeah, I'll say it again. Take care and keep singing.